Hey everyone, happy May 14th. Cue that cheesy intro music. Yeah,
Mhm,
this is going to be on
mhm.
YouTube.
What he's gonna do is he's gonna catch us fooling around and, like, play all that, and then he'll start the music.
Of course.
Yeah, you gotta have a B-roll,
Typical.
obviously.
This is a serious show.
No,
We're straight shooters over here in security, you know?
That's right. All business.
All business. Anyway, welcome to Fix Tuesday, Tuesday, May 14th. Patch Tuesday. We made it to May. It's been quite the interesting year so far, but May is shaping up to be rather quiet, surprisingly, given how hot and heavy the year started with all the XZ stuff and a lot of the other stuff that's gone on. Um,
Everyone took a break for RSA. They were just like,
the
"You know what?
I
No
was
no threat acting this week.
no,
I'm
of
gonna be on
course
my
not.
best behavior while,
Yeah, there's
everyone's
a
just hanging out in San Francisco and
yeah,
having a good time."
exactly. The APTs take a break when
Yeah.
they see
maybe they
RSA
were at
load.
RSA too. They just took a break and went to RSA.
Somewhere.
For sure they were.
Saw my old friends from NSA. Does that count? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
technically, there are threat,
kind
cyber
of,
command,
I
there are threat
Yeah,
guess.
actors there. Yeah.
Let's not
no
talk about
comment,
those
and
years.
yeah,
Friendly ones, you know?
in case they're listening to us right
Brits are
now, it's
probably
not.
around, yeah.
Yeah, blink twice if you're safe, Jason.
Yeah,
Oh, but cool stuff coming out of RSA, right? Like the SSS stuff, the memory safety pledge, I thought was rather cool. I've always been a big fan of those kind of you sign your name on the form type pledges because it really makes it real for a lot of people. And I'm really happy to see the memory safety stuff in there. I know it's a big part of secure by design, but it's really cool to see the industry kind of take it a little bit more seriously than in years past. But yeah, Patch Tuesday, it's a pretty light one. There's a couple I think are really shine a light onto that memory safety issue in Windows. 2024 30033, which is a Windows search service elevation of privilege, which we all kind of thought was a very interesting attack vector. So, just curious your thoughts, Matt, on if you pop a box, how you would approach these type of elevation of privileges.
yeah. I think that one's an interesting one because I guess in my head, search has access. I mean, it indexes your whole system, right? And so it knows about every single file. And so I think that's a really interesting attack vector where I know we were talking earlier, it's a maybe a special cheat code. You do up, down, left, right, BA in the search bar, and you get root privileges. But I'd be really curious to see if there's any POCs for that come out because, um, yeah, that's just a kind of out of the box way. It's almost like the most obvious way you might want to do that, but it's interesting how that came about recently.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like just hitting that Windows key and then I assume they just mashed like a bunch of stuff in there, right? Like
Yeah,
traditional overflow type attack. The patch notes are really light, but right, like it's such a how would you weaponize that? Just it's just one of
right.
those funny ones where you see in the patch notes, right?
Well, I mean, it's like anything that if you know, we tend to ooh and ah over, you know, remote, RCE, right? Remote code execution is sort of the holy grail, because it just allows you to grab that brass ring, and operate with a, fair degree of impunity. But, you know, when you look at modern exploitation, actors are not shy about chaining together a number of vulnerabilities to do a single exploit. And
Yeah,
so chaining together actual exploits is not a big deal, right? And so if you're able to land on that box with user privilege, which is going to be the case for a user driven compromise, either through phishing or watering hole attack or something similar. Okay, great. Now I've compromised Jason Kikta. I'm running in context as him, but to do what I really want to be able to do, I need to achieve admin on this system. And so that's where Privest comes in. So, will these get you owned by themselves? No, you need something to do that, to get you that initial access, but it doesn't even have to be an exploit. Again,
Right.
it can be, straightforward user phishing, and that Privesk is where, that's sort of the first step in the chain where you really need an exploit, unless they're running as local admin, you're going to need that exploit. And so it's very helpful, and it's helpful not just with that user, but maybe you're able to move over to a server within the network. Maybe the user isn't where you're interested in, whether you stay as the user on that endpoint system that you compromised, or whether you Privesk. You're gonna move over to a server at some point. You're definitely gonna want to Privesk there, and so having
Yeah.
these things that'll be running on Windows Server, potentially are helpful as well. So these are valuable exploits to any actor.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of the Operation Triangulation from a couple months ago, where they had like that 5 or 6 deep exploit chain.
Yeah.
It started in the browser, and then they overflowed some like image reader right on the Mac device, and um, they chained it all the way through to get root on the host. And it's, yeah, these kind of privilege escalation vulnerabilities is what I always think of nowadays, is like those type of triangulation attacks, or post phish, post I'm a user, how do I get to system, and how do I maintain persistence. And I think the next one, 2024 30018, plays along those same lines, where it's in the Windows kernel itself. And
Mhm.
it's funny because people don't, you know, you think of a kernel, you always think of Linux land, right? And not a lot of people realize that Windows has its own kernel as well, and it runs a
Yeah,
kernel underneath
every OS
everything.
does.
And it's just as susceptible to these types of attacks.
Mhm.
So yeah, I find all of these, and there's a ton in the notes. The release notes, this patch Tuesdays, lots and lots of privilege vulnerabilities. So
And
keep an eye on those.
I think also, I mean, I think we can all agree that most attacks are user compromised these days, right?
Yeah.
Like it's pretty hard to get RCE on systems. So I would say most attacks are going to users, phishing, spear phishing. And so I think that's why these are particularly interesting is you get the right user, you escalate the privileges, and then depending on who it is, they could have access to a lot of stuff, and then you can install whatever they want.
Yeah, I think it's user driven exploitation is what you do the rest of the time, right?
Yeah,
If there is some RCE against a public facing piece of infrastructure, VPN appliance, a load balancer or something, then you have your mass exploitation events that tend to run hot and fast, and everyone kind of jumps on that bandwagon for a while, and then
yeah,
after that starts to fizzle out because people have started patching, or just multiple actors have fought over the same box, and the
yeah,
things kind of spoken for. Then you go back to old dependable, which is users are going to user, because it's just it's just too easy to social engineer someone.
yeah. And I think things have gotten a little. Honestly, I think things have gotten a little more dangerous, right? In the Chrome patch that came out last week on Friday, right? Where use after free, known exploit, and a lot of the Chrome vulnerabilities, I think last year and this year, have kind of followed that same pattern, where there's it's just you go to a specifically crafted web page, and it overflows the browser, and you're able to execute arbitrary code. And there was always like at least in the industry for a while, there was always that assumption of like, well, as long as they don't download the file, they're okay, right? But I think a lot of that has changed in the last 5 years, where there's been a lot of O days in Chrome that allow for arbitrary code execution, or you trick the user to just clicking a link, it brings them to a specifically crafted web page that allows for RCE, and that's kind of the nightmare scenario to a lot of us in the industry.
Yeah, and again, I think this ties well, this Chrome vulnerability, CV 2024-4671 ties very well to what we were just discussing, because what does use after free get you? Well, it gets you code execution. It may not, and I don't know particularly in this case, but it may not be code execution in the place that you want. You might be inside of a sandbox and not able to do a whole lot. And if that were the case here, for or the case for any use after free, where you end up in a place that is not your ultimate desire, then you are going to need something like, again, on a traditional OS, you need a privilege escalation inside a browser. You need a sandbox breakout to really go after the things that you want to get.
Yeah,
And
it
those are
just
hard too. Those
yeah.
sandbox breakouts that's pretty complex.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's not
Good,
just Joe
good,
Smo. Yeah,
Yeah, no kidding.
good.
it's not just like some POC you find on GitHub. Well, it might be, but I think the complexity is it just adds complexity there too, which
Yeah,
um,
and a lot of
is
people
I
hold
guess
those
a good
close
thing.
to their chest, right? Like, you don't want to burn your sandbox escape on some you know business email compromise thing where you're trying to funnel out $5,000-10,000 here and there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You're saving it for the big bang. Um,
And if you do
so
see somebody burning it on that, then you should really worry what else they got up their sleeve if they're going to
that's
burn
true.
it on something simple. Like, be kind of alarmed.
I got so many O days here.
They're
I'm just gonna burn
way
them.
too good for what they're doing. That's not going to make
Yeah,
me feel great.
yeah. Just found this random thing on GitHub. Gonna run it, right? And it's like
Yeah.
a day or something. Um,
I mean, not gonna lie, we all do that in Hack the Box. We just search the CVEID,
Yeah.
POC, point and shoot.
yeah, and that's what a lot of these remind me of, right? Like a lot of these privilege escalation vulnerabilities. They tend to, sometimes they get weaponized, right? But a lot
Mhm.
of them end up in the kind of the training realm, where you search for, yeah, they get weaponized, and then they might have a brief window of exploitation, but the industry patches them out, and then they end up in like the training kind of pillar, right? Or you find the CVE, you find the POC on GitHub or wherever, and you it might be a Metasploit, it might be a Metasploit module or something, and then you're launching payloads against these compromised hosts to learn. So part of that part of the industry is really kind of cool to see. How the CVEs kind of their life cycle. Obviously, like the big ones, um, from 2017, 2016, all the shadow broker stuff is a very popular training target a lot of the
Mhm.
time. But yeah, it's funny how that life cycle is. But I've never seen, at least in any of the ones I've done, like a Chrome breakout where you have like a vulnerable version of Chrome and you have to follow a specific exploitation path to compromise a system. So if you're a CTF vendor out there listening in, that'd be an interesting that'd be an
Be a cool
interesting
one.
one,
Yeah.
to get into your system, in my mind anyway. But yeah, Apple as well. 14.5 came out
Yep.
just the other day, and a lot of the same things kind of ring true in those as well. It's funny that maybe is Apple trying to sync with Patch Tuesday, because I think they just released 14.5 like what, just yesterday,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
This is 2 months in a row where they came out a little
close.
bit before Patch Tuesday. So, um,
And I mean, speaking of sandboxes too, there's one line for Print Center where An app may be able to execute arbitrary code outside of its sandbox or with certain elevated privileges. So we got a double whammy.
Yeah, Apple ABD
Yep.
app may be able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges, improve memory handling, right? It's just,
Yeah.
these themes that we see again and again. And of course, you know, if you can't privesc or do play a memory game to execute out of bounds, then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to try and do things like downgrade. And it's funny because Apple Mobile File Integrity has three separate fixes, and two of them are downgrade issues that needed additional code signing restrictions to prevent. One was access to a local attacker could access keychain items, and the other one was bypassing privacy preferences. So the the good news for me, at least, is it shows that I try to be optimistic about this stuff, but when you see certain themes come through, that means that it's getting a lot of attention
Yeah.
in the um in the research community. So it's getting beat up at the moment, but generally, especially with a vendor like Apple, they're smart enough to say, okay, well, there's some there, which is why they are spending their time on this subject. So now I know what I need to do, and I need to work to not only systematically find and fix these, but also to try and avoid, a little bit more effort on prevention would have saved them some work here.
Yeah. And I appreciate Apple being more transparent. I think the last couple of years they've really kind of stepped up their release notes. They've included lots
Mhm.
more detail. And there sometimes the cadence is off, you know, which really sucks as a defender. And you have Patch Tuesday, and like a week later, you have like a release from Apple. But I get it. And it would be nice if we all sunk on just a single day and everyone releases their patches the same day. But I understand like some things are more pressing than others, and releasing out of band patches is, I prefer it if they needed to.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of memory issues in this 14.5 release. And I said it so many times on this podcast about how I feel like Apple has gotten a lot of scrutiny these last couple years, and I really do hope that continues and the community continues to focus research on the Apple devices, because I feel like everyone kind of jokes about those like Apple and Windows commercials from the early 2000s, like, oh, we don't get a virus, or that's
That's
like the
right.
running joke still, right?
Wait,
But
so you're telling me that Mac OS does have viruses?
Believe it or not.
Can get there
I'll
is
have you
malware.
know that in this day and age, there is lots of malware on the Mac. But in the SMB space, a lot of it still rings true, where people still have that kind of thought that Mac is kind of safe from a lot of that, and it's completely untrue. At the end of the day, it's just under the hood. It's just the kernel
Yeah.
written in C, I think, or whatever. I don't know
It's
what
yeah.
the kernel is written in, but or
But
Macs
really,
anyway.
BSD,
any
so it's
nicks.
probably C or C++.
Yeah.
You know,
So
it
it's not.
yeah, and it hums along, and it has parsers, and it's handling a lot of things, and, a lot of user interaction, and trying to, in their case, really manage an ecosystem of devices, and so, like, there's just a lot of touch points for attackers to find the level of complexity needed to be, fairly certain that there's gonna be some vulnerabilities there, and they put in the work, and they spend the time, and they get it, and while you're less likely to see some of the low hanging fruit drive by business email compromise and
Yeah.
a lot of ransomware toolkits out there, it doesn't mean that it's a world without threats. And, you know, the researchers that are, continuing to drive all of these vendors to try and do better, or, hats off to them, because it makes a difference.
Yeah. Agreed. And your more privileged users are usually on a Mac as well. Your
Mhm.
developers and your SRE types, right? They're always running a Mac because it kind of fits that lifestyle. So in my mind, I feel like that's the more juicier target than
Oh yeah.
kind of the Windows marketing person. So
That's right. If you want to
yeah,
steal the money, you go to finance. If you want to own the service, you go and hit the engineering.
yeah, precisely. Well, cool. That's all we have today. Thanks everybody for tuning in to it is May, yes, May's iteration of Fix Tuesday. We
It's already
appreciate
May.
your continued support. Our very own Jason has his own podcast. So if you want some really cool insights into the life of Jason Kikta and being a CISO and doing product cool stuff, check out his podcast. If not, thanks for tuning in. We wish you a happy May. Hopefully it stays quiet in your realm. And yeah, keep your stuff updated.
And
Thanks,
remember,
everybody.
April showers bring May Privesk vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Outro music. Contractually obligated to say it. Put it on
That's right.
YouTube. Send it.